Welcome to the Nonprofit Report, your update on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders. I'm your host, Mark Oppenheim. Today, we are chatting with leaders from the Brain and Behavior Research Foundation, Dr. Jeff Borenstein, President and CEO, and also host of the PBS series Healthy Minds, which just completed its 10th season, and Judy Ford, Dr. Judy Ford, President of the organization's Scientific Council. So thank you both for joining us. This is just wonderful to be here. I am so interested in the work that you're funding because we all have a personal stake, right? Either ourselves, our families, our friends are impacted by your research, and it deals with a whole range of different conditions. So, Jeff, if you could jump in, and then Judy, if you could help Jeff in explaining the scope of the work that you're doing and the kinds of grants that you are considering, Jeff, as you go through your day-to-day work.
Mark, thank you for having us, and you're right on target. Everybody is affected by one of these conditions. We all, either ourselves or a loved one, has one of the above. And the conditions include depression, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, chemical dependency, post-traumatic stress, the whole gamut of conditions, anxiety. And these are conditions that affect people through the lifespan, from children to adolescents, young adults, and older than that.
ADHD, autism, that umbrella of different conditions that are included under epilepsy, and there are so many different other conditions, right, Jeff?
Absolutely. And sometimes people have more than one. So this impacts so many people. And the foundation really was started because of family members who had a loved one who weren't getting the care that they felt they needed. And they saw the need for research to develop better care. And that really is what started the organization. And it's a collaboration between generous donors, most of whom have a loved one or they themselves with one of these conditions, and the scientists. And we have a scientific council. Judy is the president of the Scientific Council that consists of 194 of the top brain researchers in the world in all areas of brain research. And it's those scientists that decide who gets the funding. So, for example, this year we approved 165 young investigator grants. And those are 2-year grants. And we had 900 applications for those grants. And Judy and the team at the Scientific Council, they decide who gets those grants. It's very competitive, but it's very important for us to make the right decision in who gets the grants.
So let me inflect to you, Judy, because this is really very important. At this point, before you've made a decision, you can go in any direction. You can go in research for cures. You can go into research for treatments. Those could be focused on drugs that have commercial value eventually. You could go to orphan diseases, which, could be very expensive and a negative cash flow in terms of return on investment, if you look at it in that perspective. How do you make your decision as to where to invest? Because this is not a commercial endeavor. It's a human health, human good endeavor. How do you deal with that decision tree if you don't take the conventional view of return on investment going where the money is? How do you decide?
I think our return on investment is good science and the future that it holds to actually reduce suffering from serious mental illness. We cover a variety of diagnoses, serious mental illness diagnoses, and we look at all of the applications. We care about the investigator. It's got to be somebody who has a lot of potential, somebody who will take these ideas, findings they get from their grants, and take it to the next step. Can involve other people in their work. They have a mentor, so it fits in with their mentor's work, but they take it to the next level and hopefully get federal from their grant. So we look for potential, and we also look for innovation. because I think that's probably one of the most important things to us as we're reviewing them. We don't want the same old. We are investing and we're investing in grants that other agencies probably won't fund because they might be too innovative and they might not quite fit with the NIMH portfolio at the moment. So we look for things that are a little outside the box that might take us to the next generation of therapies, of drugs, of investigative tools, and so on.
So I find this fascinating because in a sense, what you're saying, Judy, is that you are investing in science, in good science, and you have scientists, doctors, professionals evaluating that, but you're also investing in people, aren't you, Jeff? When you have somebody who is intrinsically motivated, they have the passion because of their own personal lived experience. You've got somebody who will question themselves in pursuit of that solution in ways that someone who is less personally invested might not.
You make such an important point. First of all, it's very hard to begin a career in brain research. As a society, we do everything to make it difficult. We have obstacles galore. And part of what we do at BBRF is give a lending hand. And it's almost like a venture capital fund, although not for profit, to give them the funds to get the pilot data to then go and get further grants to continue their research.
And we're talking about fundamental research, right? We're talking about how molecules within the brain actually functions. We talk about how connections work. We're talking about research in many situations that is so fundamental that there's absolutely no prospect or no view in sight as to how this can actually directly lead to a cure or directly lead to a commercial application that will replenish funds that are invested, right? I mean, this is real venture stuff.
It really is. And sometimes it's very basic research, as you're describing, the neurochemicals. Sometimes it is more clinically directed. It depends upon, and it's always the quality of the science and the scientist in the application process. And this process has led to some real breakthroughs that countless people are being helped by already. And I'll give an example. Transcranial magnetic stimulation, where they put magnets to the head. The early support for evaluating the benefits of TMS in depression was a young investigator grant to Dr. Mark George at the University of South Carolina. And Dr. George has said he would not have been able to do this without that early support. This was approved by the FDA in over 15 years ago, and newer versions, faster acting versions have been approved more recently. This is helping countless people around the world. And that was based upon our support early on for this initiative.
And I remember, Judy, that when people were looking at this research in the early days, Jeff, you probably have more pregnant memories than I do. People were looking at magnets being placed around the head, and there was a lot of humor that was associated with that, right, Judy?
I'm sure there was. There was probably a lot of fear that was associated with that too. In light of some of the scarier things from a while back, but it's become a mainline. I was at the Warriors game the other night, sitting next to a colleague who does this. He's an MD, PhD, but these are the people he treats every week. He treats people with TMS, and it works. And he does different based on some of the research that came out of funded grants by BBRF. Based on he now is able to understand who can use a dense stimulation protocol or somebody who needs a more spaced protocol, and so on. It's come very, very far. It is no longer the butt of jokes, if that's what you were referring to.
So when you come into a situation where you're looking at all these different research threads, and there's a mix of clinical work, there's a mix of fundamental work, and so on, Talk a little bit about, Judy, the portfolio of research opportunities that you have, how you balance it, and how you manage things like risk in the portfolio. Because as Jeff said, right, if you make the comparison between early stage ventures and making an investment there, right, the earlier the stage, the higher the risk, also the higher the reward. How do you actually look at creating a balance in your portfolio so that you are ensuring that there is a certain, on an annual basis and on a 3 to 5 year span, there's a certain amount of benefit that comes from this balanced investment?
Well, that's a very good question, Mark. I'm not sure how to answer it exactly. I think we go for innovation, like I said before, and by the way, we have 194 top scientists from around the world, and we pair them up with each other in like areas, and then we assign each grouplet, little of scientists, about 15 proposals to review. And they review them mostly for innovation, for feasibility. It's got to be feasible, no matter how brilliant it is. If they can't do it, we're not going to fund it. So it's got to be feasible. It's got to be innovative. And the investigator has got to look like they're on track to make significant contributions in their career, even though they're early in the career. So I can't say that we actually have a balance. Jeff may have a better sense of that than I do on return on investment. I don't think we're looking at it like that. We're looking at it really about innovation. Would this research someday help somebody? Can it be turned into a treatment or a better understanding of the pathophysiology of one of the illnesses that we study? Can it develop a treatment target, for example? Can their proposal, to look at a certain stem cell or to do a certain kind of brain imaging, could that develop into a treatment target for 10 years down the line for a therapeutic intervention, pharmacotherapy, or TMS, ultrasound, ketamine, all sorts of possibilities.
I think that's right on target. And Mark, you pointed out one thing, which is it's an investment in the people as well as in the actual scientific idea that they have. So if somebody has an idea and it doesn't pan out, first of all, we're flexible. They could come and say, we want to change and go to plan B in what we're doing with our grant. We always say yes, because these are high risk approaches. And we're also supporting a scientist beginning a career in brain research. So if you look at the scientists that we've supported over the years, so many of them are having an impact, whether it be the direct research that we had initially funded or some other area of research that's related to it. And when we look at return on investment, we're looking at a big picture of advancements that are happening in the field. So TMS is one. Rapid acting antidepressants. Judy mentioned ketamine. We were early supporters of the initial work on ketamine to see if it can be used as a rapid acting antidepressant.
Another series of drugs, right? That category of what were called hallucinogens and so on, where the efficacy in a medical setting of these drugs was mocked. And they were basically seen as illegal substances used for recreational purposes by people with an alternative lifestyle. And what's happened over the years is that the medical establishment has taken a very serious look at this, and indeed you have these research threads that are incredibly valuable.
Exactly. And part of the research is to understand the mechanism of action. So, for instance, with the psychedelics, we want to see if we could figure out how to get some of the positive effects of it without some of the side effects of it, so that it could be helpful. And the rapid acting approach, whether it be TMS or some of these other medicines, is a game changer. Because if you think about it, somebody has depression and is at risk of suicide. They get admitted to the hospital, and they may need to be in the hospital for a few weeks until the depression lifts and the suicide risk lifts. But with a rapid-acting antidepressant, the depression lifts and the suicide risk lifts right away in a few hours. The person can go back home from the emergency room that day and go to school the next day, go to work the next day, and continue treatment safely on an outpatient basis. It's a game changer. When I was a resident learning psychiatry, we couldn't imagine that this would be the case. But this is a reality right now, and more work is being done.
One of our colleagues, John Crystal, I was talking to him yesterday. He's vice president. I'm president. He's vice president. He'll be president soon. He got started. He was one of the founders of the whole ketamine push for ketamine as an antidepressant. And he was telling me yesterday that they are now coming up with a method to prolong the ketamine effects. So it's rapid, but of course it begins to wane, but they now have a new approach to sustain it, to make it a longer, not just rapid acting, but long acting treatment for depression.
As you can imagine, in our work, recruiting leaders for organizations like this, we come into a lot of contact with people with a lot of different conditions themselves. All right, they sit on boards, they sometimes lead organizations and so on, and it could range from depression to ALS to epilepsy to various other neurological conditions and physical conditions. When you are interacting with this community, there's a lot of hope, and that hope can be exploited in negative ways. How do you assure the community that you're serving that you are pursuing the best course in terms of investing these very scarce grant dollars? That includes your donors, those people who are affected by these conditions, even the people who are not going to get the grant. You want them to encourage to apply again if they have a promising research. What is your way of interacting with the community that assures them of the seriousness and the methodological approaches that you take that assures that these resources are being well invested?
Yeah, it's such a good question, because our donors are very passionate about this. They themselves, more frequently, they have a loved one. Some of them have lost a loved one tragically to suicide. Yeah. And they don't want, and the sentence that they say is, we don't want this to happen to other people. So they are very passionate about better treatments, about research. So really it is the quality of our scientific council. These 190 scientists in expertise in all area, led by Judy and others, that they care deeply about it also.
Your community is also, they function as ambassadors and explainers and communicators, right? I mean, that's part of the job here, Judy, when people are advising, is that they're here to explain even to people who they say no to, especially perhaps to people who they say no to.
I think Jeff was right on target with the idea that we are answerable to the board, although we like to say that it's we are separate from the board. The scientific council and the board are like church and state. They don't tell us what to fund, and they just want good science. But they've all had personal experiences. They are very happy with the work we're doing. They approve all of the grants that we fund, although again it's a very separate, but they do look through the grants that we fund. And I think that pretty much that's our community. I mean, I am personally a researcher and I study people with schizophrenia. So I also have my own community, but it's separate, from BBRF. That is my own research.
Now, you also create webinars and events, and you also have, Jeff, Healthy Minds TV. So talk a little bit about this idea of creating community, right? And communicating out to the community, also accepting messages coming in. How does that actually function from a communication strategy perspective?
It's so important for us to get the word out. And we do it in a few ways. As you said, we have monthly webinars where scientists will present in a lay-friendly way so that regular people, not scientists, could understand what they're explaining. We have other events. And really, my impetus to do the Healthy Minds public television series is to really educate the public so that people know, number one, there is help available. Because even with current treatments, the majority of people with depression don't even seek treatment.
Right.
People suffer in silence. We want to encourage people to get treatment, and then we want people to know what the most cutting-edge treatment is that's available for them. So being able to get the word out is important. And as you said, Mark, hearing back from our constituents, hearing back from our donors, from the scientists, what's important is that feedback loop is extremely important to us.
I'm looking at your website. You have a lot of different resources. For example, just tomorrow, you've got a show, a webcast on incorporating universal screening and school-based mental health initiatives in the classroom. That's fabulous. And then on December 9th, what can light show us about brain activity? So you're functioning as a communication vehicle. In terms of these shows, are these always experts in their fields communicating out what they're finding? How does this actually function, Judy and Jeff, in terms of this communication strategy?
There must be. We get the word out. I get posts frequently for who's going to be on the Healthy Minds broadcast, and I've attended a number of those. I know Jeff says it's not for scientists; it's for the lay people, but I actually find them extremely interesting and educational. So I've found myself listening to a lot of them. I would highly recommend the guy tomorrow, Constantino. He was given an outstanding achievement prize by BBRF last year and gave a dazzling talk.
People who are homeless, metabolic. We do a lot of work in the homeless area, metabolic psychiatry, post-traumatic stress in children and adolescents. These are fabulous, fabulous shows, Jeff.
Well, thank you. And it really is because of the guest. Judy has been a guest on an episode of Healthy Minds. And I think it shows the broad reach and importance of research for better treatments and for methods of prevention. So when we talk about homelessness, which is such a big issue, so many people experiencing homelessness have an untreated or undertreated psychiatric illness. And if we can have better treatment so that they do get treatment, that's a big step in helping homelessness. When we talk about the criminal justice system and people being involved in the criminal justice system due to their psychiatric symptoms, well, better treatments, methods of prevention can have such an impact on that problem. So these are problems that face society that we don't typically think of from a psychiatric research perspective, but really are important for so many people in so many ways.
Does some of your work also deal with the behavioral aspects of people who are functioning in a way that could incite psychiatric issues in others? In terms of, let's say, in a classroom, I've heard stories of very compassionate work within a classroom, and also ways of working with students that can incite a real blowback. I'm thinking about the people who are being targeted at this point by our immigration policies. Look at the impacts there. Are you also dealing with that sort of behavioral aspect that is not about biology, but about those interactions and how we should interact with one another to help us have a healthier situation when it comes to our own behaviors and our own responses to trauma? Are you dealing with that, Jeff?
And you bring up a very important point. Over time, our field has learned how important trauma is and the effect of trauma on developing illnesses and exacerbating illnesses. So we've supported research really looking at the effect that trauma has on the brain and on these conditions. So you're right on target with that. And again, this is not something that we were thinking about 20 years ago. This was not a focus, but it is now, because these types of life events, these types of traumas make a big difference. So understanding the effect of it on the brain, and therefore figuring out ways how to treat that right away before the illness arrives, can make a big difference for people.
So it's the preventive side, right, Judy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I think that we haven't quite touched on is the fact that a lot of the grants that we fund are animal focused. So investigators doing animal research, getting down into the cells, getting into the physiology, but about half of them are human focused. So they are doing human work with real human patients and in real human situations. So PTSD is one of the areas that we have begun to fund more than we did when I first started with the organization. So we're beginning to fund that. I can't say that I've seen a grant on bullying, but I think I might have. So for example, what you're talking about, in the elementary school setting, reporting out what happens when kids are bullied later on. There's also the ACEs. What are those? Those are the childhood adversive experiences. So that's another thing that you will see in some of the grants that we fund. So it's very much on our minds. And I think that when there's a brain signal associated with it, it also serves to really underscore the importance of preventing it, and also destigmatizes it at the same time. So it's not just somebody complaining and they can't get over it or whatever. There's a biological basis for it, and it's something that we can see, and we hope something we can treat.
I have one final question, since we're coming to the end of our time, and that has to do with you funded grants, the work is being done. How are we sure that the work that is being funded by this nonprofit sees the light of day and is shared with a broad community of scientists who can take advantage of this work? After all, in many respects, although donors are contributing, right, those donated dollars, they're tax deductible, and in a sense, we're all part of this. Can we all benefit, Jeff?
Absolutely. And the science that we support, the scientists that we support, first of all, we get follow-up information from them that they complete the task that they promised to do. And then the way that it's reported out is in the literature. So published papers about the science is a way of getting that word out, so scientists know about it, clinicians know about it, and then it can have an impact on further research or clinical care. So it's a very important part of our mission to make sure that the science moves forward and it's used in a way that makes a difference in people's lives.
Such important work, Dr. Jeff Borenstein, President and CEO, and Judith Ford, President of the organization's Scientific Council. Thank you so much for sharing with us the great work of the Brain and Behavior Research Foundation. Please thank your board. Please thank your donors. Please thank your staff. Please thank the 192 prominent mental health researchers who are reviewing this work. Please thank your audiences, and please thank the patients who also participate, who are part of this family. We really appreciate your work, and we so appreciate your insights.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for helping us spread the word.